The sun was setting over the dry plains, turning the sky into a burning orange bowl. The ranch looked peaceful from a distance, like any other place in the West, but up close, it was a world of harsh shadows and hard work, where every day demanded more than a man could give. A wind swept across the land, kicking up dust and rattling the boards of the old ranch house. Inside, the air smelled of sweat, smoke, and old wood. It was the kind of place that didn't welcome weakness. Lena Morrow stood in the dim kitchen, her hands shaking as she tried to wipe the grime from her face. She had been traveling for weeks, riding through storms and surviving on scraps, trying to get here before nightfall. She had come with nothing but a broken heart and a desperate secret. Her dress was torn, her hair tangled, and her boots were caked with mud. She looked like she'd crawled out of a nightmare. The mirror in the kitchen was cracked, and her reflection looked like a ghost. She stared at herself and whispered, "I'm filthy, inside and out." Her voice sounded small in the empty house. She had expected the ranch to be abandoned, like the others she'd seen on her journey. But the lights were on. Someone was here. A door creaked upstairs. Lena froze, her heart pounding like a drum. She listened as heavy footsteps came down the stairs. The sound of boots on wood echoed through the hall, slow and deliberate, like a man who owned the world. The footsteps stopped in the kitchen doorway. The rancher stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden in shadow. He was a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. His eyes were cold, but not cruel. He studied Lena with the kind of quiet intensity that made her feel like she was being measured. His hand rested on the revolver at his hip, but he didn't draw it. He didn't need to. His presence was enough to make her feel exposed. "You're far from home," he said, his voice deep and steady. Lena swallowed hard. Her throat was dry. "I'm not looking for trouble," she managed. The rancher didn't move. "Trouble has a way of finding you." Lena glanced toward the back of the house, where a hallway led to the bedrooms. She knew she couldn't stay here, not without an explanation, but she also knew she couldn't leave. Not now. She had nowhere else to go. "My name is Lena," she said. "I need work." The rancher's gaze shifted to her hands, rough and stained with dirt. He noticed the bruises on her wrists and the way she flinched when he stepped closer. He could tell she'd been hurt. He could tell she was running from something, and he could tell she wasn't lying. "I'm Caleb Thorne," he said. "You're late." Lena's heart skipped. Late? Caleb's expression didn't change. "The storm hit 3 days ago. The water troughs are dry. The horses are thin. If you want work, you'll start now." Lena nodded. She was too tired to argue. "I can do it." Caleb stared at her for a moment, then turned and walked out of the kitchen. Lena followed, unsure what else to do. The ranch was bigger than it looked from the outside. It was a maze of barns, pens, and fences, with the main house at its center. The sun was sinking fast, and the shadows grew long. The air felt colder than it should have, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Caleb led her to the barn. It smelled of animals and old hay. A lantern hung from a beam, casting a flickering light over the interior. The barn was filled with tools and equipment, but the real treasure was the stack of blankets near the corner. Lena's eyes fell on them, and she felt a sudden panic. She knew what those blankets meant. She had heard the stories. The rancher kept blankets for the dead. Caleb noticed her reaction. "You've been around death," he said. Lena forced herself to breathe. "Everyone's been around death." Caleb nodded slowly. "Not like you." He handed her a pitchfork and pointed to a pile of hay. "Start with that. We'll see if you're worth the work." Lena grabbed the pitchfork and began to lift the hay, her muscles aching. She worked until her arms burned, until the barn became a blur of shadows and sweat. Caleb watched her silent. When she finally stopped, he approached. "You're strong," he said. "Not many women can do what you just did." Lena looked at him, surprised. "Thank you." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "You're hiding something." Lena froze. She had been hoping he wouldn't notice. She had been hoping she could blend in, become invisible. But Caleb's gaze was too sharp. He could see the truth in her face. "I don't know what you mean," Lena said, her voice shaking. Caleb's expression hardened. "You came here with dirt on your boots and fear in your eyes. You're not just tired. You're running." Lena's chest tightened. She felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't afford to cry. "Not here, not now." I'm not running from anyone, she lied. Caleb took a step closer. Yes, you are. Lena's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to tell him everything, but the words stuck in her throat. She had kept her secret hidden for too long. If she spoke it aloud, it would become real. Caleb turned and walked away. You'll sleep in the guest room. Eat when you're told. Work when you're told. Don't ask questions. Lena nodded, feeling like a prisoner. She followed him into the house, her heart pounding. The guest room was small and plain. A single bed stood against the wall, covered in a thin blanket. Lena stared at it, remembering the nights she'd spent sleeping on the ground, wrapped in whatever cloth she could find. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands to her face. She couldn't do this. She couldn't stay here and pretend to be something she wasn't. But she also knew she had no choice. The next morning, Lena woke to the sound of the ranch dogs barking. She sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. The sun was already high in the sky. She could hear the ranch hands moving outside, their voices carrying through the open windows. She dressed quickly, then stepped out into the yard. Caleb was already there, watching the horses. He didn't look at her. He simply nodded toward the barn. Lena walked to the barn, her stomach twisting with dread. She could feel his eyes on her back, judging her, testing her. She tried to ignore it. Inside the barn, the air was cooler. The horses were restless, their breaths visible in the morning chill. Lena began her work, feeding them and cleaning the stalls. The chores were endless, and the sun beat down on her back like a hammer. As the day passed, Lena's mind drifted. She remembered the night she had fled her home. The fire that had destroyed everything, the screams, the blood. She remembered the man who had done it, the man she had loved. She remembered the moment she realized she had been betrayed. She had been a fool. She had trusted him. Now she was alone. She had no one. And she was filthy. Not just in the way her clothes were dirty. She was filthy in her soul. She had done things she was ashamed of. She had lied. She had stolen. She had hurt people. She had survived by becoming someone she didn't recognize. She had become the kind of woman who could be forgotten. Lena wiped her hands on her pants and stared at the floor. She didn't know how to become clean again. That night, Caleb called her to dinner. The table was simple, but the food was warm. Lena ate slowly, her mind still lost in memories. Caleb watched her with the same calm intensity. "You don't speak much," he said. Lena swallowed. "I'm not used to talking." Caleb nodded. "You're used to surviving." Lena flinched. It was like he had read her mind. "I'm not asking you to confess," Caleb said. "But I'm telling you something. If you stay here, you will be tested. This land will not forgive weakness." Lena looked up. "Why are you helping me?" Caleb's eyes hardened. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone. I know what it feels like to be dirty. I know what it feels like to be hunted." Lena's heart skipped. "Hunted?" Caleb nodded. "There are men out there who don't forgive. Men who will drag you back to the life you left." Lena's blood ran cold. She had thought she was safe. She had thought the ranch was far enough away. But she realized now that she had been naive. She wasn't safe. Not here. Caleb stood up. "Go to bed. Tomorrow you'll work with the herd." Lena nodded. She watched him leave the room, his silhouette disappearing into the shadows. She lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Her mind raced. She couldn't stay. She couldn't leave. She was trapped, and she was terrified. The next morning, Lena woke early. She stepped outside and saw the herd grazing in the distance. Caleb was already on his horse, riding toward the fence line. He looked back at her and nodded. Lena mounted her horse and followed. The ride was long. The land was unforgiving. The wind cut through her clothes, and the sun burned her skin. Lena felt her strength fading, but she refused to give up. She had come too far. As they rode, Caleb spoke without turning his head. "You have a scar on your wrist." Lena's heart pounded. She tried to hide it. "It's nothing." Caleb didn't respond. He simply kept riding. They reached a narrow canyon, and the herd began to move through it. Lena followed, her eyes scanning the cliffs. She felt like she was being watched. She couldn't shake the feeling. Then she saw it. A figure standing on the ridge above them, barely visible against the rocks. A man with a rifle. Lena's blood ran cold. She tried to warn Caleb, but it was too late. The rifle fired. The sound cracked through the canyon like thunder. The horse beneath Lena reared, throwing her off balance. She fell hard, hitting the ground with a jolt of pain. She rolled, trying to get up, but her ankle twisted. She cried out, and the herd scattered. Caleb shouted. He spurred his horse forward, charging toward the ridge. Lena crawled toward her horse, trying to drag herself away from the canyon. She could hear more shots. She looked up and saw the man on the ridge again. He was aiming at her. His face was hidden, but his posture was confident. He knew he had the advantage. Lena's heart pounded. She tried to stand, but her ankle gave out. She fell again, and the pain shot through her leg. She felt something in her pocket, a small metal object, a key. She had forgotten it was there. She had stolen it from the man who had destroyed her life. She had stolen it from the man who was now hunting her. The key was the only thing she had left of her past, the only thing that could prove she wasn't just a dirty runaway, the only thing that could save her. Lena clutched the key in her hand, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at the ridge, and she saw Caleb's horse fall. Caleb shouted, his voice breaking with rage. Lena realized the truth. Caleb wasn't just a rancher. He was a man with a past, a man who knew what it meant to lose everything. A man who had been betrayed, and now he was about to lose the one thing he cared about. Lena's vision blurred. She felt the world closing in. She knew she had to act. She forced herself to crawl toward the edge of the canyon, dragging her injured body through the dirt. She could hear the man's footsteps approaching. She knew she was about to die, but she wasn't going to go quietly. She reached the key, pulled it out, and held it up toward the sky. She screamed, "Caleb, I have the key!" Caleb heard her. He turned his head, and for a moment his eyes met hers. The man on the ridge aimed again. Caleb drew his revolver. The world went silent. Lena waited for the shot, but it never came. Instead, Caleb shouted something she couldn't hear, and the man on the ridge vanished. Lena stared in shock. She didn't understand, but she knew one thing for certain. Caleb Thorne had just saved her life, and she didn't know why.